Okay, so we are officially live. Welcome to our first topic together. Thank you for hopping on.
You're welcome. Anytime.
So I will have you introduce yourself quickly, but I will do a brief introduction if that's cool.
That's fine.
Okay, so hi everyone. If you hop on, please feel free to say hi, say your name. I'm keeping an eye on the chat here so I can kind of share your comments with Brittany. Shaddy's in the room. Hi, Shaddy.
Hey, Chad.
So people are just coming in, but I'm just going to get started for time's sake because I know it's late. But I'm Crystal, and again, this is another live brought to you by KD Coaching. It's going so well, and the more topics I get and the more guests that hop on, I'm just going to keep running with it. So I have Brittany on today, who I love dearly. She has a background in property management and sales, and she did pursue an education in a career in the beauty industry. So she was able to go to California and attend, is it MUD?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So after doing that, having that on her portfolio, she decided to become a mom. So that's awesome. It's been super exciting for Brittany. She's super busy. She is a stay-at-home mom and has ambitions to just create a community right now for women and other mothers that are trying to improve their overall health, their wellness, and so much more. So that's a little introduction. Do you want to say hello and kind of why we picked this topic today? Introduce the topic, I should say.
So the topic is named Subtle Triggers, but we have another name also though for it, and it's called the triggering trigger effect. And that is something that we will actually get into more in depth later.
Yes.
But I think that you hit it on the nail with introducing me. I'm excited to be here and I'm ready to get into all this stuff.
Yeah, so we did pick the topic subtle triggers. I think this is something that can relate to so many different areas of our life right now.
Absolutely.
Triggers are huge, and triggers are in literally everything that we do. Every person that we get involved with, we have to pay attention to how we're triggered in those ways. People, environments, and just things, memories, music, anything that gets our emotions kind of out of whack. So I'm going to kind of give a brief definition of what an actual trigger is. And then I'm going to ask a few questions and then we'll get into like examples and things like that. So what would you say is like your overall goal for tonight in terms of what people take away when they leave this live?
My biggest goal that anybody could take away is one, probably identifying that if they do have triggers, because a lot of people don't realize that they do. The second thing would be that healing is a journey. And so, if you do have triggers or you're just finding out that you have triggers, it's nothing to be ashamed of. We always have an opportunity to grow every single day. So if the only thing we get out of this is that just know that healing is a journey. And if you have triggers, you can slowly but surely get through them.
Yes. So just a quick definition. A trigger is something that affects your emotional state and it causes extreme feelings of just being overwhelmed or really distressed. So people get the terms like stress and distress confused. Distress is just prolonged stress. Like it's taking a toll on our bodies, our mental health. So like I said, it could be a person, a place, or a thing, like a memory or just a familiar feeling that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually can bring up like negative thoughts or influence our behavior. And so being that I was an addiction counselor, we used to throw this term triggers all the time. Like they lead to thoughts, cravings, and the next thing you know, you're using. But again, we're human and triggers affect all of us. If we've been through something good or bad, you can be triggered.
Absolutely.
Right? So the thing to pay attention to is that oftentimes these symptoms that the triggers create get worse over time if we don't identify what those are.
Right.
So some examples, hi Emily, of some triggers, like the distress that it could cause would be anxiety. That goes hand in hand with fear, sadness, overwhelming sadness, and anger. Do you have any more that are kind of subtle that I'm missing?
Actually, no, I had the same exact things. I mean, I think that pretty much if you're gonna say anything like more subtle than that, I would say anything that you're directly affected by, if somebody says something or a smell or anything, because it's a person, place, or thing, a touch, anything that will make you feel super, I don't want to use the word uncomfortable because I feel that that's kind of, yeah, but anything that gets your insides like, I would
Yeah.
say, is definitely a trigger.
Yeah, anything that's causing uncomfortable emotion. So this is, hi, Evelyn.
Hey.
So triggers are not just caused by trauma. Like there's a lot of, and let's back up. I don't know if you were on another live where I mentioned like trauma is not just, it doesn't have to be catastrophic. Like people
Right.
experience different forms of trauma throughout their life. It could be significant to you, it could be overwhelming, but trauma looks very different for everybody.
Yes.
So even if you haven't experienced some kind of trauma, like I said, addiction, self-harm, anything that's not benefiting your mental and physical health, all of that applies. So like I said, so we, if you're just entering the room, we're talking about subtle triggers today. It was like something that Brittany and I really wanted to bring up, just because it's part of our healing journey and recognizing kind of where we're at with it, what triggers look like for you, and how to kind of overcome that. So are you comfortable with kind of sharing an example of one of the subtle triggers so people can kind of relate, and then we'll throw a little bit more out there and feel free to engage if anybody has other examples.
For sure. Um, so you're saying like some of my subtle triggers that I have? Okay, well, I actually have 3 of them, so I'm being overly generous.
Oh, we love vulnerability.
So I think number 1 for me, this is no in order, but I'm just saying my number 1 would be loud yelling, or like being aggressive, very loud. I could say that could go for women, but predominantly it's with men that I could be very triggered by. And I think that that's just coming from a background of having experiences with men, a man, or anything in that category that I feel I have been triggered by through my past experiences. My other one, which I not just, but recently found out that it is a trigger, is that it's known as, and you probably know this because this is what you do, emotional dysregulation. So like I have a hard time, and I'll just use my husband for the example, but like, let's say if my husband was very focused on doing something, and so he has a blank face, there's no emotion, it's just blank. I can't differentiate if you're focused or if you're extremely mad, or like if you're mad at me or if I did something wrong. And for the longest time, I didn't know what that was. I just thought that, I don't know, that just was one of my things. But I realized that that is a trigger, and it does come from having a parent or in past relationships, or any person that could be directly affecting you, who had dramatic emotional fluctuations. So someone who doesn't know how to regulate their emotions, someone who is highly sensitive, somebody who is destructive with their emotions, how that can be passed on to you, me, and then now I don't know how to regulate my emotions with people, or how people's emotions, I don't know to tell if they're one way or another, and I take it as it's either my fault or it's an attack to me, because since it was so destructive, you never know, well, is that person mad? Like, are they going to do something? Like, you think all these things. And really, they're just focusing on work, and I'm over here with 1,000 things going through my head. So that would be another trigger of mine. And then lastly, I think that my last trigger that I found is just, I would call it blaming. I don't like to feel like I'm being blamed. I don't like when I get very triggered when I feel like somebody is trying to project this or like make me feel inferior to them, or like in that, I guess, aspect, or like create lies, or like just blaming. And I think it's because I try really hard to be intentional about who I am and what I do. So that's a really big trigger for me. So those are my 3 triggers.
So I'm just gonna reiterate, just if anyone's coming in the room. So we have loud yelling, that's a big one for a lot of people. And then blaming, or when you feel like you're being wrongly accused, right?
Yeah, or like your character is being attacked, or just like this superiority, like that complex that someone's trying to get over on you, and you happen to like feel inferior to that person because of what they're trying to do, I guess.
And the other big one is when other people don't know how to kind of regulate their own emotion,
Yes,
but like don't really communicate that with you.
exactly.
Not regulate. So that's a huge one. I'm gonna sit on that for a second.
Mhm.
And I think that was honestly, if I had to pick any of these 3, I think that one was the one that actually triggered this whole topic. And I think it's important for other people to be aware that like relationships, like if I had to like tell my my younger self something now, it would definitely be like in life we have to navigate our relationships. Like relationships don't go anywhere, whether that's with your husband, your boyfriends, siblings, like it's just a way of life. And so many times people find themselves in an area of depression or loneliness, abandonment, because relationships have been strained and we
Right.
don't know how to heal from them, confront them, make things better. Like no one really teaches you how to do that, right? So I would say that out of all of them, when we're not taught how to regulate our emotion and we go into our other relationships, even having children, like
Yeah.
we're unhealed from that. So it kind of just like a domino effect, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And then some of the time when we're like flipping out and super, super triggered, it's actually a result of somebody else being triggered.
Absolutely.
And
That's the triggering trigger effect.
we don't know how
Mhm.
to understand that or how to confront that.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like we don't learn how to do that. And so that's kind of the point of this conversation, is like identifying where you're at in your own relationships right now and taking the step back, not to be more empathetic, but kind of have that perspective.
Yeah.
That like what you're doing is probably, it's not always the wrong thing or you're a bad guy. It's other people's journey and their healing process. And it takes time for them to realize that. So as long as we're aware, we can kind of like, I don't know, hopefully like influence those changes in other people.
No,
Which is
yeah,
great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
To go just piggyback off of what you said, I had wrote something down because I heard somebody say this, which was very interesting. When they talked about relationships, standing on 2 legs. And so it's both people in that relationship, and both people have a responsibility for what goes wrong and what goes right into that relationship. And that goes to saying, could your trauma or your triggers be ruining your relationships or causing any type of strain on your relationships? And I think it's important to know, especially like you're saying, identifying what healing you need or what trauma or triggers that you may have. Because at the end of the day, all we have are relationships, whether that is a relationship with a spouse, boyfriend, mother, father, whatever that is. We have to also have accountability for our own triggers and our own healing that we need. The person also said that we all think that we're all healed. We all go through this thing like, we're healed, we're here, no, we're fine, we've been through that. And really all we've done is just suppressed a lot of memories, and we haven't really been through them. And we don't really know that, because the only time we know that, or any time it gets engaged into that, where we're like, oh wow, maybe I am triggered, is when a trigger happens and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't felt this in so long, and now I do. And I say that to say, because when you are in relationship with people, it can be very difficult for that other person if you don't identify the healing that you need. And it's like someone trying to see through cracks of the nurture that you need for your wounds. It's like very, very difficult, and it could be very difficult for another person. So identifying definitely that you have triggers for your relationships to last longer would just be beneficial in itself, because all we have are relationships, and they have to be healthy in order for us, to go on with this life and thrive.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, if you're in this room and it does strike a chord, we're not leaving you like distressed with a bunch of thoughts about triggers. We're eventually going to get into like how you handle that and what worked for Brittany and what worked for myself. Because till this day, we talk about it a lot. We are triggered. And I want to go back to the important thing you just mentioned. Triggers are attached to memories a lot of the time. And one of the biggest downward spirals we get into is when we are triggered by something, then we're like, oh my God, I'm not healed, even if we've done a lot of work already. And I just want to share, like, as somebody on my own healing journey, and Brittany continues to be on her own, like, triggers are not necessarily a bad thing. It's how we fill in the blank, how we cope with it.
Cope with them, how we communicate through them.
Yes.
Yep.
And the only way, like, we're not robots, right? And we don't just erase all our trauma and we don't erase all the memories. So it's natural to have a song come on, or a time frame, or a memory itself, a person, an event, something happening where that's going to come up because it's embedded in us.
Right.
But self-awareness is key, and how we, I don't want to say navigate that, but cope and treat other people when we are feeling that way.
Yes.
It's going to come up. So what would you say was a turning point for you when you realized that yes, it was a certain person or a certain people, place, or thing? Like, what?
I'll never forget it.
Oh,
Yep, I'll never forget it. So I was in LA when I was living in LA, and I needed to get my dog as an emotional support animal. And so I probably shouldn't be saying this online, but I needed my dog as an emotional support animal. And so I was like, everybody has a little bit of anxiety. So I'm like, I have anxiety. I need my dog on the plane with me. And I guess just the way things happen for a reason, because the nurse practitioner that I had that had came to I guess talk to me, started asking me like open-ended questions, and started going into like, I guess, what I deemed was my anxiety. She like dove in to whether that be my childhood or my past experiences. And I remember there where I went in and like just signed the paperwork. All of a sudden she had me go back until like back when I was like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'm like crying hysterically. And I'll never forget it. She told me there, she was like, you have anxiety, but it's only because you suppressed your issues, or suppressed a lot of your emotions that you have. So for me, I was the type of person to say, okay, so I've been through that, or I went through this, but so what? Like, look where we're at. We moved on. We made better. We did better. Like, life is great now. But by doing that, I also never allowed myself to feel what maybe wasn't right or wasn't normal. And I just suppressed it for so long that I never knew that my body was just reacting out of so much suppressedness that I didn't even know what was happening to me. And I remember that day. I remember I came out in the car and I was sobbing. And from there, I was like, I never realized that until I talked about it with somebody, that like, maybe there are a lot of things that have happened to me that I feel triggered by, or I'm not okay with, or maybe is not fair, or whatever those words are, but that truly affect me years later. And from that point, it was my turning point to be like, okay, I need to sit with this and really figure out what's going on, where they're coming from, but most importantly, getting to the root of where all those things stem from.
Mm-hmm. And besides yourself, just now that you're aware of this whole topic, what do you recognize or see in other things or people around you when they're not self-aware enough to know that that's what the issue is? Like, what do you see? What does that look like?
Are you so you're saying like, what do I see when I see other people that are going through that stuff but they're unaware?
Yeah.
So that is how I came up with triggering trigger effects, because I was literally front row in a conversation with two people who I understood both sides of their story. Like, I do genuinely understood both sides of their story. I saw someone who was trying to heal and trying to like show another person like, look at this. And I saw somebody who And I understand their situation as well. Like, no, like, no, I don't want to see that. And for the first time, and taking a back seat to this, I saw someone who did something to somebody else, who triggered them, who then, in response to that, triggered another person, and it just went horrible, like just horrible. And I guess I never really realized, like, wow, these triggers, some triggers not only come from past experiences or, like you said, trauma or whatever, but some triggers are passed on by people. Um, Again, parent, spouse, blah, 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 whatever. But they could be passed on by people. And that was the first time that I seen in front of me two people with a great heart be at odds off of a trigger that affected another trigger that ultimately affected every trigger possible. And now those two people didn't want to be in communication, which, hurts to see anybody, whether if it's family, friends, even strangers. You don't want to see people feel that way towards one another in general. And it honestly looked like in that moment, neither of them realized what was going on. But I was like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And I'll never forget being like, oh my gosh, this is like a triggering trigger effect. And obviously we had that conversation about like how this is actually not, I don't want to say normal, but it happens a lot. And a lot of people have passed down triggers that they don't know about, and nor do their person that passed it down to them even know that they've done that.
Yeah. So how would you, like, what would you say, being that you're like getting, you're still on this journey, what would you say is like some of the biggest tools that have kind of started to unravel and help you kind of navigate all through that, and even like share share with other people so that they're able to do the same? Is there anything like that's been super helpful to you?
So what has really been helpful for me is really finding out, where do these things come from, these triggers of mine, where do they come from, getting really to that root of it. They say, like, for instance, like bamboo is illegal to plant in your, on your property. Why? Because it will take over the whole garden. And yeah, you could chop off the top of it, but the root will keep on bringing you back. So I found myself really going to the root of my issues, and where are they, and how did it happen, and maybe who could have caused it, or what experiences did I have, finding that, but also allowing myself to sit with that, because it is okay to be triggered, and it is okay to feel those feelings. You shouldn't feel like, dang, I shouldn't feel this way, or like, whatever. Things happen, and you can't, it's no point of blaming, other people. Life happens, things happen, and how you feel is how you feel, and your truth is your truth. So you're allowed to sit with that. I also, another thing that helped me is just being a little bit more mindful, because sometimes when we have triggers and people trigger us, we assume that they're attacking us, and that may not be the case. Some people accidentally trigger you, not intentional. They just maybe do something, said something, wore a certain color, maybe wore a certain cologne, and you're like, oh no, like I can't do this. So I really try to practice being mindfulness when it comes to that. And I think, and lastly, just communicating, learning how to communicate in a healthy way, in a healthy environment, and communicating with, whether that's my partner or whatever, and saying, hey, listen, for example, like the emotional dysregulation. I sat my husband down and said, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I think I have a trigger to this. You know how every time you ask me, hey, why do you always ask me if I'm okay? I'm like, I think I found the root to that problem. And I think this is what happened to me. And so now it makes me act this way. And I'm actually sorry if that, like, for all these years that it bothered you, but I got to the root of it. And I just want to let you know that if I do that, it's coming from this place. So try not to get upset at me more at it, and try to understand where I'm coming from, so we can work through this together. And communicating that way has helped me tremendously, because I'm open and direct about what's going on. I know it's hard for everybody to be that way, but where I'm at now, I'm open and direct about what's happening to me, how I feel, in that moment, within a couple, in a couple days, if I changed how I feel, I'm just vocal about that. And I find being vocal, because nobody can read your mind, and it's nobody's, it's nobody, like, they can't heal you. It's nobody's responsibility to heal you, only you. So like, I
Yeah.
find by doing that, I can move through my triggers way better. I know how to communicate through them way better, although we're still growing, because I'm not perfect, but I've learned how to communicate through them more, sit with them, allow myself, and it's really helped me. And I encourage anybody that if you don't know how to deal with them, not saying that my way is 100% correct, but I do think it would help you tremendously.
Yes. So thanks for sharing that. I think
Mhm.
of like, for me, it's definitely familiar feelings. So like, it starts what I call a trigger train. So everyone hear me out.
I like that, a trigger train.
A trigger train, but it's like you have something that happens and it could be totally unrelated to, the root of the issue,
Mhm.
but it's a familiar feeling. So I feel heartache again. I feel rejection. I feel like I'm not being heard. And like that there, if I don't recognize that and do what I call like thought stopping, it ends up taking me down this rabbit hole
Yeah.
where I'm like, I feel like I'm like back at square one and I just never did anything and nothing worked.
Yeah.
But so in order to prevent that now, you mentioned like the mindfulness, communicating. I think I found it really helpful to just like share with somebody that I really trust and just like tell them where I'm
Yeah.
at so that you can get that like affirmation again. Like, no, I'm proud of you. No, this isn't who
Yeah.
you are. Like, and kind of just, get you back up off your knees again. Because there's no worse feeling than feeling like it might be 3 months, 6 months, a year from now. Like I finally got out of that dark spot. And like now I'm feeling the same rush of emotions that I was at a year ago, but I know that I did a lot to get out of that. Why am I here again?
But you can also, that I had written down, I just didn't share, a journal. And I know that that sounds,
No, it's not.
but really, like, so sometimes I journal my prayers, and I do that. And when I find that my prayers were answered, or whatever the case may be, I write them down. And I do that because at times where I feel hopeless, or I feel like, I'm just not being heard, I go back to my journal and I see, oh, wait, okay, so this is the one time I don't feel heard. But look at all of the other times that I'm heard, or my prayers was answered, or I got blessed with this, or, it just doesn't allow you to go through that hole, and it allows you to stop and understand, no, what you're triggered, and you want to go down that hole, you want to go down that rabbit hole, but you really did do heal, you really did get healing, you really are having, breakthrough, you really are, killing it on your journey, or whatever it is. This is just a hiccup that we all go through, because we're always going to be triggered by something. You can't tell me there's no one in the world that doesn't have one trigger. We're all going to be triggered by something, but that journal will give you the proof in the pudding that this is only a moment, this is not your entire healing journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. 110%. I'm trying to pull up this chat here to make sure that I'm not missing anybody's reactions or comments.
Mhm.
While I'm continuing this, if anybody has a trigger we hadn't hit on, like I know we gave you categories, but anything that you're vulnerable enough to kind of just share, I will definitely like let Brittany know what that is, and then it might trigger a different conversation. Right, I'm trying to go back to my chat here, and here we go. All right. So keep an eye out on that. So another thing, I love the journaling. I had that on my list.
Yeah.
I had exercising, and then I always used to share this with, back in the day when I counseled, DEADS, or DEADS. Everyone write it down. It's an acronym, but I literally use pretty much all of these. There are situations we're currently in where like there's no escaping a certain person, a family member, an environment. Like some of us don't have that advantage.
Mhm.
So this definitely helps. So the first one is distraction, like a healthy distraction, where your mind is not, always just engulfed in whatever's triggering you. Escaping, which sounds really rude, but like if I know I got to go somewhere and there's certain vibe or like someone there that just kind of puts me in this rabbit hole, like I'm going to go, but I'm going to go for, an hour. And plan an escape in a way, because that's a boundary. I have acceptance on here, because the sooner you accept that, like, yeah, it's a forever trigger and I'm going to have to just navigate through this, it becomes easier to deal with. And then I have delay and substitute. So delay is like, not necessarily putting off something, but just giving yourself time when you need it.
Yeah.
And substituting is more so for people that, let's say, get triggered and their thoughts lead to a bad behavior. Like I'm gambling hard, I'm partying hard, I'm whatever. So substituting, like maybe my drinking's putting me more in a deeper depression. So instead of going out, I'm going to like have a bottle of water and just act like it's vodka. I don't know. But whatever makes your situation more comfortable for you and not feeling guilty about putting those boundaries in place.
No, yeah, definitely boundaries. Yeah. And but back to what I was saying about, and this is just a piggy bank off of you, is what you said about, even if when you were talking about escape, if you only can stay an hour because you already know how this could, turn out. Also with mindfulness, just being in tune with your body and your feelings. And eventually that will allow you to be more aware of toxic patterns. And I think that when we're not aware of what triggers us, we can put ourselves in toxic situations, toxic patterns, or toxic whatever, and wonder why we're so triggered by certain things. And really, slowly but surely, if we could practice a little bit of mindfulness or really look at what we're doing or where we're placing ourselves at, we can eliminate a lot of those triggers, or at least being triggered by the trigger, because you're aware of who you're around, what you're doing, and what causes them.
So you lead me to my next question, and then I have a question in the chat. But how does your healthier coping now, when you say mindfulness and journaling and all those things, talking to somebody and things like that, opening up about your past, how does all that help your relationships now? Like, what are the fruits that you're seeing because of your healing?
So definitely my confidence. I would say that's huge, because now that and communication. I was not a communicator. I'd rather just shut down and not talk about it and just bottle it up inside. And then I will cry. And then it's like, what the heck are you crying for? And then I don't want to talk about it, but I'm just crying. So now that I'm like, I overly communicate. I'm like, no, are you listening to me? This is what I'm saying. Okay. Now that I overly do that, in a good way, I find that by communicating exactly what's going on with me, or what makes me feel what, or what makes me that I don't feel, it allows me to have better relationships with people, because like I said before, they can't read your mind. So the only way they're going to know if they're hurting me, or if I like something, or if I enjoy them, or if I don't enjoy them, whatever, it's only if I communicate that. So I think that my relationships have skyrocketed because of communicating. It's boosted my confidence, because now I don't feel like, I used to feel like, oh, well, they hurt my feelings, oh, well, this, and kind of like isolate myself, because I didn't know how to say none of that stuff. But now that I do, now I walk in confidence. Now I'm like, okay, so if you do this, I understand, I'm going to explain, and we can move on, agree to disagree, or however. But more than likely, even if you agree to disagree, you still have good relationships. I've never had really a relationship where we agree to disagree and it just, didn't work out. It kind of always found its way. So, and with my marriage, because again, our healing is our own journey. I love my husband to death, but I can't heal his wounds. He loves me to death, but he cannot heal my wounds. You have to do that on your own. And, you're like an onion. That's my favorite word to say when it comes to healing. You're always pulling back a layer of an onion. So every time you're pulling back, there's always something new, but that's for nobody else to figure out other than yourself. So I think that me doing that has helped my relationships tremendously. People understand me, I understand them. And when you understand somebody, I think it's just easy, it's easier to go through the relationship with them. So that's what I was saying.
Yeah, I love that. I also think the fruit I'm seeing in my relationships now, at least family relationships, are like I just feel like more peace.
Yes.
Sometimes your relationships aren't going to look exactly how you want them to, but if you feel
Right.
more peace instead of
Yeah.
anxiety, then you are doing better.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So in the chat, I had a question, so give me a second to scroll down. I'm getting used to this new computer too. Let's see. Okay, so in the chat, why can I not see this? I saw a question from Deep and it's not like populating now. Am I doing something wrong? Let me see. Overview, live chat. Okay, if you're still in the chat, either retype your question or maybe I need to just scroll down a little bit more. I don't know what's going on. Okay, are you there still?
Yeah.
So it says, how do you deal with parents who allow their past traumas to influence how they raise their kids?
Okay. I actually, it's funny. Do you want to go first, or
What did you say?
I said, did you want to go first, or?
Sure. So again, the question is, how do you deal with parents who allow their past trauma to influence how they raise their kids?
Mhm.
The worst thing you can say to somebody is, you need more healing, or like you need to
Or you need
heal.
therapy? Yeah.
That is super triggering.
Yeah, I've seen, I've all types of like, you need therapy. And I'm like, I don't think that's like the correct way to tell somebody that they need help, but okay.
Yeah. So I think when it comes to parents, we have almost like a generational barrier that like none of us are ever really going to truly break or change.
Yeah.
So it's our job. Sometimes I feel like now that we're learning more about this, it's stuff we probably should have learned in school. But now that we know what we know, I just like to try my best to have those hard conversations. And for some people it's not possible, or
Yeah.
it's just like a waste of breath,
Yeah.
So for that, I think it's just, we have the power when we understand other people's pain sometimes, and it doesn't justify what they did. But when we understand the way they were raised, or maybe the way that they internalized their hurt, and like back then they didn't have as many resources as we have today to then heal the way we heal.
Right.
It's like, don't talk about what you're feeling. Like, don't go get talk to a shrink, or don't talk to a psychologist. Don't pray. Like, they didn't have all these tools that we have now.
Yeah.
And so the more we heal, the less pain or distress that trauma causes. It's
Yeah.
still there, but it doesn't hurt as bad.
Yeah.
So that's my
I-
answer.
I completely agree. I do believe, obviously, like past generations, I think, and obviously everybody does it now, but I'm saying I personally believe like the generations before us, they suppressed a lot of their, like, cause of what you said, they didn't believe in going to a therapist, or whatever the case may be, or it looked silly or funny, or you were considered crazy if you had to go to a therapist. So they suppressed a lot of their hurt or a lot of their trauma. And by doing so, I think that they have deleted it. And I always say, deleting what you've been through never gets you anywhere. You didn't delete it, you suppressed it. And it comes out in more ways than one. You don't see that, but it does. It spills off of people and you can see it. This is, another topic as to why I call my the name triggering trigger effects. I have several people in my life that we talk about these things where maybe their parents were triggered by something, and then the kids become triggered by what the parents were triggered of. But then the parents are like, you need healing. What's wrong with you? And it's like, wait, no. I think we both need healing, or we both need to see somebody, because what I just explained to you is something that you gave to me. Like, so like for an example, and I've seen this a lot, especially in the younger generation. So you have a mom and you have a dad, right? And either the dad or the mom, whoever one, talks bad about the other one, or, maybe not talk bad, but overly explains what's going on in their relationship, or whatever the case may be. Oh, you was at this, your mom did that, all this other stuff. So let's say your parent, let's just go with the dad, because that's, a lot of people's situations, but let's just go with the dad. Say the dad was not the best. Say he was not the provider. Say that he, lacked being a true father, lacked love, lacked all these things. So you do have triggers. You have triggers because your parent, lacked to give you those things that you needed as a child, right? But when you have another parent also talking about what the dad didn't do for them, what you don't realize is that that child's triggers are this big, right? Because of all the things that their parent did to them, lack of, that they didn't do for them. But now when you add the spouse's issues to you, now your child has this many triggers, and really those triggers at the top are not theirs. They're yours. That was never done to them. That was done to you, right? So it's about taking accountability for the things that we allow, because you allow what you allow. You said that to me, and that's the other day, and it's stuck with me ever since. You allow what you allow. So if you're a parent, in a relationship, and you have your children, what you allow in your relationship is what you allow. And I think that to communicate with our kids that, we all flaw, everybody, we all have flaws, things happen, blah, blah. But I don't think talking bad about or overly expressing what your parent didn't do to you personally, being the other parent, is the best thing to do for your child.
Definitely
because when your
not.
child grows older and now they're 30 years old, and when you talk to them, all you hear is, well, my dad did this to my mom, and my mom did this to my dad. And it's like, but I mean, I get it, but that's not your issues. Those
Yeah.
weren't your experiences, like those are traumas and triggers that your mother or your father went through, not you. Focus on what you went through, because now you done filled your bucket up with so much stuff, it's overspilling and you don't know how to clean it up.
Yeah.
So, but like you said, identifying who you're dealing with. I give a great example. When I was going through my anxiety that I had, I was able to sit my mom down. I'll never forget it. We were walking through a mall, and I told her, Mom, I went to go like do this and that, and the person said this, they said that, and this is how I feel. And I'll never forget, she just was like, I'm so sorry that you feel that way. Like, at the end of the day, like, I was just doing my best. Like, I'm so sorry that, this has happened to you, or, whatever. But at the same time, I can't have that conversation with other people. They are like, anxiety, what? Anxiety who? Like, what is even that? And I think that it is your job then to understand not everybody can identify their triggers. Not everybody can admit that they have, healing that needs to be done in those areas. And if you know that, then you just have to make peace with that and heal yourself on that journey. It's hard,
Yeah.
but because you do just want your parent to say, I'm completely sorry. I did my best, but you know what? If it hurt you what I did, I am sorry. And like we talked about this before, we're like, do you know how many people would be healed if if parents and kids could just say, I'm sorry, that's it. Sorry this, sorry that. And like, boom, done. But we don't live in that world. So I think that dealing with that, just identifying who that person is, identifying their own triggers, because you have yours, so that obviously they have theirs. And I think if you could take anything away from this is, if you're healing and they're not, that's their life. You do you. You keep healing and you worry about you, and just come to peace with that. You're trying to, level up in your healing process, and you pray for that person that they'll get there one day. But if not, it's about you, really. It's about you moving forward.
Yeah. And you, this comment in here is piggybacking off of what you already said, but many parents were traumatized without even knowing that they were traumatized. So yeah, if you're in here, I think we have two advantages. Now we know we can be self-aware, continue our healing, but also be a different parent, be a better partner,
Right.
and not repeat the same kind of generational curses, as we call them.
Yeah.
I also think that as humans, we're very defensive. So what you're
Yeah.
going to get from our parents a lot of the time, or other people, are like not validating what your trauma or your pain is.
Yeah.
Like, because for that to happen, they then need to feel that and then own it. And
And it's hard.
it's hard, right?
Yeah.
So just recognizing that.
Because like I say this all the time, what's the hardest thing? The truth. You know, it's easy to lie, it's easy to move without saying the truth. It's easy to do that. The truth is the truth, and that's the hardest thing that you can swallow.
Yeah.
So unless, you know, if you recognize it, and it's never too late to start, you know, like I don't care if you're 50, 60, 70 years old. You know, it's never too late to start. If you know you have triggers from since you were 2 and you're 50 and you want to be like, you know what, actually I deleted the last 20 years of my life. Like I actually should feel that so that I can move on, so that I don't pass that to, at this point, my grandchildren or whatever, you know, or other relationships, you know, work on that, do that. It's obviously doesn't do any harm, but make you better.
Yeah. And it's so common, I guess, like in our generation now, and even like a little before us, that the previous generation are parenting out of pain.
Yes.
So when they don't even realize it, so you're not really going to get the sorry that you might need to ever grow. But all that does for me is just remind me that, okay, hurt people hurt. Is that acceptable? No. But now that I know that, I know what I'm not going to do to my child.
Right. And because accountability is a big thing, because even though like they parent out of hurt, yes, but obviously, and it goes for them. Like obviously when our parents were younger, they couldn't do anything because they were minors and their parents raised them, right? And in that hurt, and then now they raised us in that hurt, and so on and so forth. But starting for every adult that had to raise somebody in hurt or in whatever, there's always accountability. Because if you decided to get with somebody who you toxic, not in a good relationship, you know, had baggage that you couldn't stand or whatever, or they cheated on you and you stayed with them. Well, when you make babies out of that and you get married out of that, or you whatever out of that, even though that's a past experience that is probably traumatizing to you, you have to in your healing process understand that, yeah, you may be a victim, but you have to have accountability for allowing what you allowed, for getting into those toxic relationships, to whether if you believe, you know, fornicating before, you know, you were married, whatever those things may be, you also had a choice and did what you did with that other person. And again, that goes across the board. I'm not talking about just parents, and I'm not talking about just mom and dad. That's with anybody. Healing is taking full accountability for a lot of the things that we allow, that we victimize, that we think we're a victim to a lot of things. But had we known better, we would have done better, but that still doesn't make it right, you know? So
facts right there. I like that. So we're gonna wrap up soon. We had some likes in the comments and hearts, just so you know.
yay.
AKA whatever we're saying is obviously helpful. I do want to say though, on a positive spin, there are positive triggers. There's another question here, but I'll get to it in a second. When I say positive triggers, there's this whole movement now on TikTok, ASMR. We have like study triggers, sleep triggers, and all that is to say that it's people provoking a positive emotional response, or something that's going to motivate positive behavior. So let's say for studying, right? I want a study trigger. I'm going to put a pen next to my bed with my book wide open. And what's that do? When I go to lay down, I'm not going to get in bed without, you know, doing a little bit of my study. So things like that. I don't want to like misconstrue the word trigger that it's always negative, because a lot of them can provoke a positive behavior. And you can do all the negative ones you might have now, you can find ways to make them
To make it
positive.
positive, exactly.
So a question says, can you provide an example of talking in a healthy way about an uncomfortable trigger you know that you have to the person that you have the trigger with, even if it is to the person that does not know they are the cause of your trigger? So I have plenty of examples because I have to do this all the time. But do you want to go first?
Mhm.
So think the best way to answer this is to think about the person in your life, because we're talking about your healing,
Right.
that you had to confront, that you didn't already talk about. Like, how did you then share that they were actually the trigger without telling them they're a trigger, if that makes sense?
Right. So I think that because I gave an example of what I've seen two people try to do that and it didn't work, I think that if you're going to do that, I think that you would have to communicate that very, very, what's the word I want to use? Safely, I guess. In the sense of like, if you're having that conversation with that person, number one, don't have expectations, okay? Because you can't control how somebody else feels. So if you're willing to have that conversation, then you need to be aware that that person might not understand you, or you might not get a good response out of that. But that's okay, because you still allowed yourself to have that conversation, which is necessary. Number two is that I wouldn't do try to explain it in a way where this is what I'm feeling. I feel like, maybe, hey, blah, blah, blah. I feel like I get triggered when things happen like this. And maybe, the other day or the times that we've been out, this situation happened and it triggers me. It triggers me because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm not sure if you're aware of that. And if you're not, I get it, because I mean, how would you know? I never shared that before. But I just want to share it now. And I hope you could be open to that and have an open mind and an open heart. I'm not attacking you. I just want you to know that that thing causes me triggers, or,
Yeah.
or this circumstance or whatever it is causing me triggers. I would be very cautious about saying it like that. And I use the word cautious very loosely because I don't want you to feel like you have to walk on eggshells to talk about how you feel, because I don't. But it depends on, you have to have wisdom, and when you're going to have those hard conversations, if you want the correct response, in hopes you get the correct response, you definitely want to treat it very gentle, very gentle. You
That's what
don't wanna
another
do it.
person in the chat said, gently.
Yeah, very, very gently. And because also that person may not know that they're doing that. They may not know. So when you come off attacking them, they could really feel attacked, and that could be a genuine trigger for them, because they don't know that they're doing that to you. But you never know. They could be really remorseful. It just depends.
I was gonna say, it took me, and I'm pretty open about this now, but all the years I was helping people and listening to people's trauma, I just never dealt with my own. So, 27's like that year for me where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stop telling people to be vulnerable and practice it myself. So I'm telling you right now, like, vulnerability is the scariest thing, because a lot, like you guys said, like, a lot of the time you're not going to get the right response. You might get none at all. Or that defense comes out, so you feel like the person's not even hearing you. But it's for you. Like, if you get that out, whether it's journaling, writing a letter, I always do the letter thing, because that's how I had to communicate to the people hurting me the most. I could not talk to them verbally. But that vulnerability was breakthrough for me, because people don't know what they don't know. So if you do it gently, know that you're being true to yourself, because that's how I feel. No one can tell me that I don't feel this way.
Right.
Now, if they're going to validate it, that's completely different, because you might not get the response you're going to expect, but that's not why you're doing it. You're doing it for your breakthrough.
Exactly. Totally.
So that was a great question. Okay, this was a lot, but how do you feel?
Good. This is a lot, but this is a major topic. I mean, for instance, when we talked about this, we're like, oh, we'll just keep it at 30 minutes. And then we're like, maybe we might need an hour, because you don't think that triggers are loaded with things, but when you get down to the nitty gritty, they're loaded with lots of things. But change your perspective. It's loaded with lots of things. It could be a lot of negativity to it, but if you change your perspective, like, okay, it's negative, but I can make it positive. I can
Yeah.
heal from this, then it becomes something like, no, yeah, let's talk about triggers, like, let's talk, like, what are yours? What are mine? And, you can definitely get healing from other people. I know that for sure,
Well, other people and being vulnerable, but also understanding that you have more control and power than you think. Like, if you're going to let somebody trigger you all the time and cause your depression, your anxiety, shame, all that stuff, like, I've honestly have chosen to close more doors now that I'm going to be 34.
Absolutely.
Only because I don't want to keep feeling that. So if that's going to be a boundary you have to put up, one time I did it for 2 years with somebody I love dearly.
Yeah.
But I needed those 2 years to really stop getting triggered. And then now, I'm able to actually be in a room with them and tolerate them.
Yeah.
So
I think that people are afraid to let people go.
definitely.
And so they hold on to even the worst triggers because they don't know how to let that person go or live without them. But I think that it's probably one of the best things that you can do. I had to do it with somebody who I loved dearly, and while I was pregnant, but I had to do it. And people could tell you left and right, no, you shouldn't do it. No, this, no, not that. But really only you know what's best for you,
For you.
in that sense.
Facts.
So you have to ignore the people and say, I get your perspective, but you don't understand. I'm the one who has to pick up all these broken pieces and put them together. Nobody's going to do that for me. I'm bleeding here by myself. So in order to heal myself and patch up all these wounds, I have to do this for me. And you do it, and you don't look back, and you don't regret it, because again, you're doing it for you, nobody else.
Correct. Yeah, I love that. Well, I think it's that time, unless anybody has anything else or questions, comments. I really appreciate everyone coming on. I hope you got
Mhm.
something out of tonight. I will say that next week I'm going to be on talking about friendships, because I had a request for that. And the following week I'm going to be talking about introverts and highly sensitive people and how to live in an overwhelming world. So that's going to be good even for parents who have kids that are really struggling with certain things
Yeah.
too. So I think it's a wrap. Do you have any final thoughts, comments?
No. Well, did we go over?
It's exactly 9:00 on the dot.
Nice, you had perfect timing. Okay, did we go over goals? Because I wanted to know what your goals were.
For what? This topic?
Yeah, or did we do this at the beginning? Okay, I'll go for instance, my goals, through your goals, I guess, with triggers. If you have triggers, or maybe you don't, or whatever, or this is your healing journey, what are your goals? So mine's, I put, living an authentic life, authentic as I can be. And by doing so, I hope that light shines on to everybody else and allows them to be seen for what they are, because I don't ever want people to feel like, because you go through things, or because maybe you have mental health issues, or because you have triggers or whatever, that you're anything less than we're all equal. My other goal is to continue healing my onion.
Healing your onion. I like
Healing
that.
my onion. Continuous healing, because it's always a thing. And then my last one is raising healthy children, and setting an example for them, and not allowing what triggers me to trigger them, allowing them kids will have their own triggers. You can't be a perfect parent and not allow them to have any. So what triggers them, but at least they don't come for me, hopefully, so those are my goals. What about you?
I love that. I'd say I just have one, and that's to keep helping people to be more self-aware. Because these lives have been everything, because I don't know if people realize it, but they do help me, and they get me to reset my thinking a lot. And I need this right now, and I know other people need it. So the more self-aware you are, the better we can just, I don't know, get through this thing. It's hard.
Absolutely. This thing called life. Yep.
Yeah. So Again, this is all going to be posted on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed, go subscribe and share it with a friend. But I think this is a wrap for now. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy mommy schedule to come on. And somebody said we need a part 2.
Yes. No, because we can.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I hope everyone has a great night, and it's almost the weekend. So take care of yourselves, and until next time.
Bye.
Bye.